She was an illegitimate, mute girl, locked in a palace as a shadow of her sister, but instead of death, she was saved by the most ruthless commander. She had never known love. Will he give her a new life or break her completely? Her fight is just beginning. Subscribe now, and I'll make part 2. Like this video to support my work. The sun shone over the kingdom of Florent. Flowers filled the Viscount's annex with fragrance. Faye went out onto the fabulously beautiful balcony, which smelled like roses in bloom, and looked around the garden. With a heavy sigh, Faye wondered why the food hadn't been prepared yet, as it usually would have been at this time. She rubs her thin fingers together, hoping that she will be called soon so that she can eat. With a desperate sigh, Faye said, "I'm hungry." Faye walked down to the garden, and her tender feet touched the cool, soft, fresh grass. She went into the garden in her white, puffy dress, thinking that she was used to being hungry. She dipped her hands into the water from the well and said, "This place is not well known." She took her first sip of the cold water and thought, "No one usually comes here." As she quenched her thirst, Faye looked around the annex where she lived, as if waiting for someone. Therefore, this palace is a prison for the illegitimate child, such as Faye, who lives there and no one cares for her. Faye's mind is full of devastating thoughts. "I am a bastard child, a disgrace, and no one cares for me. My mother is dead. I have lost the ability to speak. My father does not come to visit," sighs Faye, recalling her sad life. Faye recalls her childhood when her father used to yell at her and humiliate her. "You shouldn't have been born. You're a stain on the family." As if in a nightmare, Faye recalls her father's words that cut her soul like knives from the inside. "You are only alive because of Che. You would not be alive at all." Faye kissed the bird, sadly remembering the past. "I wish I hadn't forgotten to replace my sister." She let the bird fly with her hand, watching it spread its beautiful wings. Faye looks at the bird as if her freedom is in vain, and adds that she would have been banished if it had not been for her sister. "I wonder if I wasn't mute?" Faye closed her eyes and wondered. The sun warmed Faye's beautiful hair as they walked to the palace, the breeze gently touching her dress. Faye was sitting in her room when the door opened with great speed. She looked around in confusion, and there were 3 maidservants standing there, looking at her like rocks, with serious expressions. Faye's eyes widened in shock, and she could not understand what had happened. The maidservants stood there like stones holding different things, but usually one person brings the food. One by one, the maidservants began to perform their duties, and one of them began to comb Faye's silky hair with a comb. Another one puts on her shoes, which are very special for special occasions, but no one says anything, and Faye is confused. Wearing an incredible ocean-colored dress, Faye's amber eyes shone in confusion, but she just did as she was told. The servants quickly walked ahead of Faye into the main mansion, as if something had happened there, confidently walking forward with Faye behind them. Nervous, Faye clenched her fists as tightly as her weak hands could, hoping that everything would be all right. Quietly entering the main hall, Faye saw her father barely touching the floor with her shoes. She stood behind her father. Looking at the silhouette of her father at the window, where the moonlight was shining on him, Faye said to herself, "Dad?" Her father's silhouette was formidable, his broad shoulders blocking the light from the window, and he was simply looking out of the window. Faye is confused, thinking, "Dad called me. Why is that?" as anxiety fills her. Father's bearded chin appeared over his shoulder and looked back at Faye. With a fiercely nervous and angry look, Father looked at her and said, "Faye." When she saw the expression on her father's face, Faye knew immediately that the day had come. Her father told her in a very sad tone that the Emperor's army was near and that she should hurry. He looked down at Faye and asked, "Do you know what you must do?" Faye understood without hesitation because she had been in a cage for years and had not seen the world or people. Cold sweat rushed through Faye's body with great speed, and her obsessive thoughts kept coming back to her. "I have to replace my sister." As he placed the knife in Faye's hands, her father said that before she was captured by the soldiers, Faye must do what they had agreed upon long ago. Looking into the children's amber eyes full of hope and love, he said, "You must kill yourself, pierce your heart." Faye's eyes grew bigger at her father's words, and he added, "Prove yourself useful." Drops of sweat trickled down Faye's temples, and she was shocked, confused, betrayed, and broken. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the cry of Che, who ran into the main hall in a panic, crying out, "Daddy!" Her father had not expected to see Che here, nor had Faye, for he had kept them apart all their lives, and no one was to know. Without realizing it, Faye asks herself if it is her sister. Che looked directly into Faye's eyes and was equally shocked to see her here. They stood frozen in place. The father tells Che that they have to run. They have to save themselves. They don't have much time, so the carriage is waiting for them. He drags Che to the carriage as she turns to her sister, whom she sees for what may be the last time, and gives her a farewell look. And now Faye stands alone with the knife, wondering how she can do it, how she can take her own life, how she can dare to do it. The silhouette of the dress is embraced by the light from the window, and the young girl stands with the knife in the middle of the great hall, alone in tears. With her head bowed, Faye realizes that she has always known this. This thought has always been with her. Holding the knife in her hands, she thought only that she was a substitute for her sister, and her life was worthless. Pulling out the knife, she looks at the sharp blade, which glistens as she sees her reflection on it. Suddenly, the thought occurred to her that she too was a human being who deserved and wanted the love she had never felt. Desperately, in tears, she prayed to Faye for at least some sympathy which she had never had or felt. Faye cried on her knees, thinking that she was just a child who wanted a little attention. The night passed, and the moon was gone, and the sun rose again over the palace, glinting off the domes. The sun's rays streamed through the window into Faye's room, and they lit up the room with a warm embrace. The rays kissed and warmed Faye's small and delicate face, welcoming her to the new day she would see. But the morning silence was interrupted by the chatter of soldiers in the corridor, who were looking around the palace, hoping for some kind of profit. One of the soldiers saw Faye in the room and remarked that a young girl in such a place was a godsend, and suggested that the others have fun with her. As they entered the room, the soldiers thought that the punishment for such an act would not be severe, even if they were caught. They thought that Warren would not inspect the entire building from the inside, limiting himself to the perimeter around it. As the soldiers stood in front of Faye, they surrounded her and talked about having fun, which was not the case. Their hideous, rough hands were raised in the air, and their strength and brutality ruled the room. They held Faye tightly, hitting her when she tried to get away, and abusing her in any way they wanted. All Faye could think of was that she could not call for help, and she prayed that someone would help her. The thoughts were like voices telling her to kill herself. She had to do it before the soldiers came. Faye is crying and admits that there is no point in living and looking for love anymore. Now she doesn't care. Her life is all pain and sadness, no joy and no hope for the future. All that remains is to be patient and everything will be over soon, Faye thinks to herself. Suddenly, her mother's voice appears in her thoughts, telling her that she loves her, as if to calm and comfort the frightened Faye. "I love you, Faye," her mother said, hugging her in her mind, protecting Faye, at least in her mind. Like a saving mantra, her mother's "I love you" was repeated more and more each time. Faye was in tears, crying and begging for rescue, and she was saying goodbye to her life. Suddenly the feathers flew up, and suddenly there was a sound of birds, and there were many of them, and they flew into the room in a flock. They began to peck at the soldiers and prevented them from touching Faye, protecting her. The soldier began to shout, "Leave her here, let's go, we might get caught." Blood poured out on the floor, and the soldier shouted in surprise at what had happened. Feathers fell to the ground, birds flew away, drops of blood dripped on the floor. The soldier saw Warren's bloody sword, and he was very angry. Max said as he rubbed the sword clean of blood that they had disobeyed orders and were not supposed to do so. With a cold look, Warren reminded them that they should think about the consequences of disobeying orders. Panicked, the soldier began to apologize and beg for forgiveness. On his knees, he tried to crawl away from Max. With a single swing of his sword, Max punished the soldier for his actions, and blood flowed down his sword like a red stream. As he holstered his sword, he looked toward where Faye was sitting, exhausted and frightened. His eyes met the confused and frightened Faye with a serious and cold gaze. He turned around and started to walk away, not reacting to the girl in the room who was in trouble, until suddenly, Faye began to kneel down. She slowly gathered her strength into a fist and decided to act. She runs up to Warren's cloak, thinking that she can't be alone anymore, and she doesn't want to be left behind. She clings to Max's red and long coat with her hands, hanging on to it with a deadly grip. She began to cry into his coat, clutching it tightly, just praying that he would take her with him and not leave her here. Let's go back in time, 10 years ago. 10 countries united to destroy the Ploid Empire and took up their swords in a war. But after a long, exhausting, and cold war, the Empire was defeated. All the enemies were punished, many casualties, many losses at the cost of victory. And the main figure in this event was Commander-in-Chief Max Warren, an unprincipled, cold leader. We return to the moment of Max and Charles' inspection of the Kingdom of Florence. Entering the estate, Max and Charles are greeted by a large, spacious main hall of the palace. Looking around the estate, Max keeps repeating how worthless the Viscount is, condemning his every action. Carl adds that even a dog defends its home during an invasion, but here everyone ran away without even thinking. Max said with disgust, "Dishonorable and proud nobles." Looking at the painting of the Viscount's family in the middle of the main hall, he simply said that they were no better than wild animals. While they were exploring the building, a pungent odor gradually crept into the main hall. Carl raised his head to get a better sense of whose smell it was, beginning to follow the scent. It was the smell of blood, Carl noticed, as he continued to walk toward the epicenter of the smell. The sunlight shone through the large, massive curtains of the main hall. As they explored the palace and followed the smell of blood, they entered the meeting room where they saw 2 bodies. One of the dead bodies had a knife in it, and Max and Carl concluded that it was obvious that they had taken their own lives. Max examined them and could not understand why they would kill themselves if they were not even soldiers. The thought flashed through Max's mind that it was not at all funny to make a substitution of people who were dead. Turning around to leave the room, Max says that Viscount should be added to the list of fugitives. They entered the beautiful garden of the Viscount's mansion, where there was an incredible number of flowers and flowering shrubs. As they walked through the garden, the flowers were fragrant and the sun was shining on the flowers, warming them to give them an incredible fragrance. While enjoying the fragrance and beauty of the flowers, Carl noticed that these flowers were rarely seen in the Empire. Standing in the middle of the garden, he said that it must have been very difficult for Viscount to leave this wonderful place. The floral scent was getting stronger, but it was definitely not here. It was somewhere else. Max looked around to see where it was coming from. On the way to this smell, Carl noticed that the farther he went, the stronger the smell. The boys were walking through a beautiful garden, a path of flowers. Max noticed that there were a lot of flowers, but not as many as near the main building, so he wondered why the smell was stronger here. And then they came to a small clearing hidden in the middle of the garden and saw the second part of the mansion, which no one knew about. The birds are flying like crazy, feathers everywhere, and there is a certain noise from nowhere. Looking at the birds of different species flocking together, Max wondered what had made them join together, why the birds of different species were gathered on that balcony and not flying away. Max stood on a tree nearby and climbed up to the second-floor balcony of the building and heard soldiers shouting. The soldiers were the same ones who had abused Faye, and they were fighting off the birds at the very moment Max heard them. Thus, we return to the events with Faye. After everything that happened, Carl says he's going to clean up the bodies and take care of everything. Max said to take the bodies to the gate so that anyone could kick them, having no respect for them. Warren feels Faye's grip on his coat and thinks that normally he would break the arms of anyone who touched him. Carl notices and jokes that there will be one more body now, hinting that Faye is no exception. No, wait, Max says. Doesn't she understand, or is she sick? Max thinks. A healthy person would know where the enemy is, Pan suggested. By the way, Viscount's daughter has never been found, he reminded himself. Grabbing Faye's hair and holding her close, he looked at her and thought, maybe she's stupid, or maybe she's a setup. Faye looks at Max in tears and mentally begs him to take her with him. It was getting dark and the moon was rising in the sky. Max was sitting on the couch. Faye was sitting next to him with her head on his lap. Max looked at Faye, who was sleeping on him, clinging to him tightly. Carl asked, "What are you going to do with her?" "I don't know," Max replied. "You realize she is useless, don't you?" said Carl. "Then why don't you give it to me?" he asks. "What are you up to?" replied Max. "You don't need it, and I feel sorry for it," admitted Carl. "Sorry?" asked Max. "He's a great commander. He's asking me to give her back, but I don't see any pity in his eyes," thought Max. Carl tried not to give away his expression. What is he up to? Thought Max. Max pulled out his sword and shouted, "Tell me, if you don't answer me properly, I'll beat you." Then Carl exclaimed, "I like the way she smells." "What?" asked Max. "What? You can't smell it?" asked Carl. "What are you talking about?" said Max. "You're crazy," said Max. "It smells good. What is he talking about? I can only smell the earth," thought Max. "I forbid you to go near it," said Max. "I can't, but why, sir?" asked Carl. "If you don't shut up, you won't be able to walk," Max threatened. Carl looked at Max with a confused and frightened look. Max tells the servant to have Faye sent to prison, but then changes his mind. Looking at Faye, Max thinks, "She clung to me and didn't even realize I was the enemy. It's so funny, but I feel so sorry for her." Faye was snoring sweetly on Max's lap, and he took off his cloak and hugged Faye gently. He carried her to the bed, and as he laid her down, he thought, "People who can't take responsibility are terrible." He covered her with his cloak and lay down next to Faye. "It's been 9 years of war, and it's been a long time since I've slept with a woman in bed," Max thought. Let's go back to Faye's past. When I was 17, I first saw blood on my underwear, and I thought I was sick, but I couldn't tell anyone because the blood wouldn't stop, Faye said. "Then I suddenly met my sister for the first time," says Faye. Standing by the well, the girls wash Faye's clothes from the blood, and Che says, "Don't cry, every girl has been there." This was the last conversation Faye ever had with Che. Back in the present day, Faye is in bed with Max. It's morning. "I don't want to wake up. There's something warm and hard next to me," Faye says. "Hard?" thought Faye, frightened, as she opened her eyes. Max was lying next to her, naked, his abs showing, and he had a great body. "Are you awake?" asked Max, stroking Faye's head. Faye remembered that this was the man who had saved her. Max grabbed Faye's arm and dropped her down, hanging over her like a rock. "If you're awake, answer me," Max said, holding Faye's hands above her head. "Do you know where the Viscount is?" Max asked with concentration. "Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you," Faye thinks to herself. "Even though he dumped me, that was the plan from the beginning," Faye recalled. "Just as I thought, you're useless," said Max. "Maybe I'm really useless. I know very well what will happen next. He will either throw me out or lock me up," thought Faye. Max put on his incredibly strong, athletic body, his black robe, and told him to send Faye to prison. "It's been a long time since I've heard anyone talk to me, and he saved me, so I should thank him," Faye thought. And then Faye said thank you with her smile. Max looked at Faye in surprise. The sun's rays in the west shone into the office where Max was sitting. A servant brought a message from the Emperor. Carl hands the scroll to Max, who says, "I have earned this reward, the title of Duke. But it may not be enough," said Max. "Tell the Emperor I'll see him after I've dealt with Florin," Max said. "Is there nothing else you can tell me?" asked the servant. "No. Is there a problem?" asks Max. No, I'll go now," said the servant. "We'll give you a place to rest, so get some rest," said Max. "Thank you. Good night," said the servant. Exhaling and leaning on his chair, Max thinks, "That girl, I saved her, but I shouldn't have thanked her, she's so stupid. She can't speak, so I don't think there's any point in killing her," Max thought to himself. "Sir, about the girl?" said Carl as he came in. "You talk about her a lot," said Max, irritated. "Are you up to no good?" asked Max, looking at Carl. "I mean it with all my heart. I want to take care of her," said Carl, panicking. "I'm not sure why you are so interested," Max said, looking at Carl's nervous face. "I know you're not the type to help. What good is it to you? Do you want to eat it?" asked Max. "No, I don't," shouted Carl. "Don't touch it. You'll forget it anyway, and you'll get the word out," said Max. "I'm not sure. It's the first time I've ever felt this way," said Carl. "Maybe this child is of elven blood. I don't know if it's true. But they say beastmen can smell elves," said Carl. "Elves feel nature. They communicate with animals. They are very beautiful, but they have become hidden because they are hunted." "Did that flock of birds come to help because they had elf blood in them?" thought Max. "Even half-breeds are valuable. If there is even a drop of them, they are useful," Max thought. "We have to get her back," Max said. While sitting in the prison, Faye heard, "Lift up your head," it was Max. That voice, raising her head, Faye saw Max looking at her with his emerald eyes. "Get up," said Max. Why did he come? Faye thought in confusion. After waiting for Faye, Max said, "Follow me." As Faye followed Max, she thought, "He said I was useless." Torches lit the dungeon, showing the way to the exit. "He saved me for a reason, and even if I die, I should repay him," Faye decided. Grabbing Max's cloak, Faye looked at Max with a puppy dog look, trying to say something without words. "Thank you," Faye said in her head. "Thank you?" asked Max. "I can read lips, so I know what you're saying," Max said. "My dad couldn't do that, so it was mostly monologues," Faye recalled. "But now I have someone I can talk to." Faye was happy. Max looked at Faye and said, "I want to ask you something." "Of course you can," Faye said. "Can you talk to animals?" he asked. "Animals?" said Faye, surprised. "Do you have the ability to control them?" Max asked. "No," Faye replied. "Do you know why I brought you along?" asked Max. "Because I can be useful?" Faye asked shyly. "Yes, but you don't know how, so we'll have to find other ways," Max said sadly. Faye was worried that she could not do anything and heard, "Can you write?" Faye thought, "I can write a little." "But I studied a long time ago, so I only know the basics," Faye replied. "What else can you do?" asks Max. "To be alone," Faye barely said. "To be alone," Max says again. "Don't rush, let's think about it," Max reassures her. "Can I be of service?" Faye is excited. "No matter what kind of person or thing, there is always a use for it," said Max. "You must do your best and be faithful, or I will give it to Carl," said Max. "In the meantime, you will be my servant," he said. The couple filled the maid's bathroom. Faye sat in the bathtub with rose petals, and the maid sat opposite her. The maids thought that Faye was going to be Max's night maid, so they ordered her to wash. But there were rumors that Warren was gay or impotent, and everyone wondered why Faye. "Are you Warren's new maid?" Faye was asked by the servant. "Servants like me do the work and get paid, but personal servants are different," the servant said as she rubbed Faye's back. "A servant must listen to her master's feelings. You must be able to flirt and always look good," the servant said as she continued to wash. Turning sharply to the servant, Faye says, "Really? Frightening the servant?" Faye has so many questions in her mind. "What is flirting? I want to try it. Tell me more." Looking at Faye naked in the bathroom, the servant thinks, "Not the first beauty, skinny, Warren has strange tastes. She's unlikely to last long." "Usually men like to have a woman sit on their lap and flirt with them," says the servant. "It's simple, memorize everything the master likes," the servant advises. He takes Faye by the chin and draws her close to his face, looking her straight in the eye. "Just be faithful and don't have any unnecessary feelings," the servant said. "That is the most important advice, and do not forget it," said the servant. It was night in Warren's chamber, and the soft light from the lamps filled the room. Max was sitting on the sofa reading a paper. Faye entered his bedroom, wearing a thin white dress and doing her hair beautifully. "I thought they'd tell her where she was supposed to sleep, but they thought she was a night maid," Max thought. Suddenly, Faye touched Max's knee gently with her hand. Warren looks at her with a look of incomprehension. Faye sits down on Max's lap. They stare at each other as if mesmerized. Max put his arms around Faye's waist and lifted her up a little higher. As he gently squeezed Faye's waist, Max thought, "Is she naive or is she pretending?" He suddenly pushed Faye away from him. Max asks, "What are you doing?" Faye twirls her hair around her finger in embarrassment. Max doesn't understand, but Faye puts her hand on her head and gestures. Max puts his hand on Faye's head, gently and carefully. Faye closes her eyes in pleasure. She wanted to be praised, Max thinks. "How silly! I never thought anyone would want to pet me," Max thinks in surprise. With her hands folded like paws, Faye sat on Warren's lap, receiving his approval. "Maybe she doesn't have elf blood, but dog blood," Max thought jokingly. "It's too late to call for servants, and I need to keep an eye on her, so I'll let her stay with me." He threw the pillow and the blanket on the floor. Max stands and asks, "Are you going to sleep?" looking at Faye. With naive eyes, Faye says, "I see." She runs to lie down on the pillow on the floor. "What are you doing on the floor?" Max asks in surprise. But Faye was already lying on the floor with her eyes closed. Max was surprised and scratching his head, he looked at Faye. She laid down without thinking, and at the first meeting she clung to me without thinking, thought Max. The moonlight was streaming into the room, making the atmosphere more intimate. Warren was lying on the bed, and Faye was lying on the floor beside him. It's so strange. When was the last time I fell asleep so easily? Could it be because of her breath, he thought? In the morning, Max and Faye are having breakfast, and Faye gets her food dirty, and Max says, "Wait a minute. Put the plate on the table and get the cutlery," he told her. "Wipe your face with a napkin to keep food off your clothes," Warren added. "Okay, I'll wipe it," said Faye eagerly. "She understands," said Max. "But she's not socialized and doesn't know the rules of behavior." And then Warren thought, "I told her to change her clothes and she did it right away, trying to eat what fell on the floor." Could she be a bastard child? That would explain everything. "She looks like the girl in the portrait," Max recalls. "She seems to have been raised as a disposable double. It doesn't look like she's an elf. No one has been taking care of her. She could not even think of escaping. She was just waiting for her death. Whatever it is, we need to teach her a little so that she can be useful," Max decided. Max took her to his library, and he ordered his chamberlain to teach her everything, reading from the beginning. Now, while the chamberlain is teaching her, he will be responsible for her. The chamberlain looked up and down at Faye. Faye looked at him innocently with her orange eyes like autumn leaves. The chamberlain thought she was just a night maid, and he was annoyed. He wondered why some people should have to work hard and be born aristocrats. He clenched his hand into a fist and thought, why? Why did Warren ever let a woman sleep in the same bed with him? Realizing that she was dumb and unable to do anything, he took a swing at Faye. He struck her angrily across her pretty face. Poor, exhausted Faye covered her face with her hand and waited for the blow. "How can a slave of a defeated nation look at me with such arrogance?" asked the chamberlain to Faye. He chastised Faye for her bad behavior, adding that Warren was only harsh on nights. The chamberlain threatened Faye that if Warren found out, he would do everything he could to keep her from living here. After a while, "So, do you need to review what I taught you?" asks the chamberlain. He forces her to talk here and now, threatening Faye and scaring her. Faye realizes that she doesn't know what to say and can't because she is mute. The chamberlain smiles an evil smile and looks at the pile of papers. She throws the pile of papers at her, right in her face. He makes her beg for a servant to teach her. "You don't know anything until you're hit," he laughed. The chamberlain ordered her to keep quiet about the punishment or Faye would be sent away. He locked Faye up and told her to think about what she had done wrong. Meanwhile, Faye is thinking about how much pain she is in and how scared she is. What scares her most is that she will not be needed. Sitting in tears, Faye hears a familiar voice say, "What's going on here?" She looks up, her eyes red with tears. It was Carl who asked Faye, "Are you alone?" Faye sees Carl's cute cat ears. Meanwhile, Carl asks, "Where did Mr. Warren go?" Faye also sees Carl's tail moving smoothly. "A tail?" says Faye, surprised. She touches Carl's tail to make sure it is real. "It is a tail," Faye admits. "What a fearlessness," Carl adds. Carl got down on one knee and leaned over Faye and told her it was dangerous to grab someone like that. Carl asked Faye if this was the first time she had ever seen an animal man. Carl introduced himself and asked if he could call her Miss Faye. Faye just stared at Carl, her eyes fixed on his. "Miss Faye, you shouldn't be so careless about grabbing the tail of an animal man," said Carl. "That is not good behavior," said Carl. Bad behavior? Thought Faye, frightened. Faye thought that now Carl was going to hit her. She closed her eyes and waited in fear for the blow. But she feels warm hands gently touching her. "I have to look after you," Carl said. Carl began to tell her that to pick up someone's tail was love at first sight, that it was forever and that no one could break it. "That's why we are." Before he could finish, Carl felt a pain in his tail. It was Warren. "Watch?" he asked. "I warned you to stay away from her," Max said. With fantastic speed, Carl was already standing at the window saying that he had something urgent to do. He quickly jumped out of the window and said, "I'm going to go." Faye was nervous, remembering that it was very high up. She quickly went to the window to look out and saw Carl screaming. "Miss Faye, I'll see you later," Carl shouted. "But it's so high up. Are all the beastmen so fast?" thought Faye. As Faye stood by the window, Warren came up to her. "Did you like Carl?" he asked. Faye told him enthusiastically about how Carl had come downstairs. Max said that he could do it too. "Are you a sorcerer?" Faye asked. "No, but something like that," Max replied. Warren asked Faye to be careful with Carl by calling Carl a pervert. Faye, not knowing the word, said, "Pervert?" Max patted Faye's head and said, "It means he's bad." Carl said that Faye smelled special, and he didn't even listen to me and came to her, Max thought. Taking a strand of Faye's hair, he smelled it and could only smell soap. Perhaps only animal people can smell it. It was dawn. Max and Faye stood in a room that was bright and warm from the sunlight. Faye was trying to tie Max's tie, but she was not very good at it. Max calmly showed her again and told her to try. She tied the tie perfectly after he showed her. Max realizes that he has set aside a person to teach Faye, but she is still not doing well. Although she understands Max from the first time, he thinks maybe the problem is with Cameron. Max finds himself thinking that maybe the Chamberlain doesn't care about Faye, and that's why she doesn't understand. Or maybe she's just not capable. But if she's not capable, then Warren has no reason to keep Faye around because she's not useful to him. The sun was rising and warming the roof of the palace, and the birds were singing, and the wind was shaking the branches of the trees. Zinocta and Carl were walking outside the palace, talking to each other. Carl asked Zinok if Warren had called him a pervert, and he followed him. Zinok replied that Warren had indeed said so, but if Carl was not a pervert, what did he want with Faye? But Carl replied that he had already told him that he only wanted to help her. Zinokni believed Carl, said that it was not something to joke about, and said that Carl and Warren deserved each other, and that they had made Faye a night maid. Carl shouted at Zinokne that she was not a night maid but a day maid, causing Zinokne to stop. Zinokne understood and said that he and Faye were sleeping in the same bed. Carl asked if Faye would be so unharmed if she slept with Max, for he is not a gentleman in bed. Zinocta and Carl reflected on the fact that Max hadn't had a woman in years, and now he had saved a prisoner and was sleeping with her. Zeno asked why Carl didn't ask Warren himself if he was so interested. He replied that he would be considered a pervert and would rather just ignore it. Carl asked if Zinok would help him remove the ban on Faye, and Zinok wondered why he wanted Faye so badly. Carl replied that she reminded him of his sister in his dreams, but Zinok said that was nonsense. Zinok is very confused as to why Carl and Max are so interested in Faye. Then Zinok offers to go to Warren's office, but Carl says that Max is in a meeting, so he's not there. But he gladly agreed to the idea, but said that if anything, it wasn't his fault and it wasn't his idea at all. Zinok agreed to take the blame while Carl was pushing him. When they opened the door, they saw Faye sitting on the floor with the Chamberlain standing over her, holding a handkerchief. They were perplexed and asked, "What is going on here?" When they saw the handkerchief in the hands of the Chamberlain and Faye lying on the floor with her head bowed down, they asked, "What are you doing here?" The Chamberlain began to excuse himself by saying that they were in the middle of a lesson and Faye would not listen, so he had to take more severe measures. Carl thought, what kind of lesson was this, and how dare he hit someone I like? Carl kicked Kammerger in the leg without hesitation, and he fell to the ground in shock. Sneering at Chamberlain, Carl says that he forgot to say hello and doesn't know the basic rules, and that he should be the one to learn, not Faye. The Chamberlain looks at Faye and thinks that it is because of her that he is suffering all the humiliation that is happening now. The Chamberlain tries to apologize, but Carl puts his hand on his shoulder. She tells him that if he ever uses such methods again, he will not leave here alive and in one piece. Carl frightened, chastised, and chased the Chamberlain out of the office. Zeno bent down to check on Faye and ask her if she was all right. The Chamberlain was punishing Faye because she was disobeying orders, but she was so happy to have someone to care for her. Zinok extends his hand to Faye, holding some berries in his hand, and decides to give Faye some. Faye doesn't understand her being taught how to serve food and drink, but not whether she can eat. Zinok extends his hand and continues to say, "Here you go." Faye is worried, but Zinok says it's just a berry, no big deal. Faye dares to eat the berry. Leaning into the hand, she eats the berry with her mouth right out of Zinok's hand. It tasted good, both sweet and sour, very juicy. Xenox said that he himself was very fond of this delicacy, but today he would give it to Faye. He had thought she would be more like a cunning fox, but she was just a trusting child. Zeno wondered if she would be all right if she stayed with Warren. Carl stood leaning over next to the professor, breathing very loudly through his nose and smiling. They knelt beside Faye and admired her, and now Zeno understood why Warren had forbidden Carl to see Faye. The situation with Florence had stabilized, so Max decided to go back. Carl was leaving Max's office when he ran into Chamberlain at the door. Carl reminded Kamerger that he had been following him and observing his behavior. Carl turned and walked away, and the Chamberlain mentally told him that he was pissing him off. The jailer could not calm down after Carl saw him with Faye, but he beat her gently so that no one could see. He was not wrong about getting rid of Faye as soon as possible. Let's go back to Max's office. Max asks Chamberlain if Faye is really not doing well and she doesn't understand. The cameraman confirms that Faye is unteachable and doesn't understand, so he thinks the lessons are pointless. Max wanted to see Faye's reaction to this by looking at her. But she chose not to say anything, so he thought it was useless. He could send her to Carl or use her as bait for the Beastmen. Max said that he didn't plan to keep her for long anyway. He would send her to someone else, but for now he told her to continue her studies. Faye hadn't expected Max to disobey Chamberlain, so she wasn't surprised. She was disappointed and felt stupid for believing Max. It couldn't last forever. He didn't need her at all. But she doesn't want to leave Max. She wants to be with him all the time. She won't try to convince him to stay because she thinks he'll hate her. The sun was breaking through into the study room, lighting up the room with its warmth. Faye was sitting on the sofa, wiping the cutlery with a napkin. As expected, she was not supposed to be here in the first place. Faye hoped she would be useful if she became a servant. The cutlery shone on the table, glistening in the sunlight. The Chamberlain looked at the work Faye had done and for the first time praised her. But one praise won't change anything. He's still waiting for her to be sent away. The Chamberlain kept looking around for Carl and reassured himself that Carl was at a meeting. The Chamberlain wondered what all the dignitaries saw in her. The Chamberlain crept up on Faye and came up behind her like a ghost. He said he wasn't going to hit her, he just wanted to teach her a thing or two. He offered to tell her how to ask Warren to leave her. But Faye turned around and rejected the suggestion because she didn't want to. Chamberlain was surprised and dumbfounded that she had rebuffed him. The Chamberlain seized her hand and squeezed her thin wrist very hard. He told Faye not to give up her housework, or she would have Warren give it up. Faye was frozen, and Chamberlain confirmed that this was the right decision. Suddenly, there was a shout from behind her. "What are you doing?" The Chamberlain realized that it was Carl, but he didn't understand why he was here, for he was supposed to be at the meeting. Carl shouted again and asked the Chamberlain what he had done. The Chamberlain stammered and could not find the words, for he was surprised and did not know what to say. His eyes fell on the dishes on the table, so he simply said that their lesson was over, and he was just taking the dishes away, and saying that if it was over, he could go. But Carl asked where he was going. He would deal with him later, but the most important thing was Faye. Faye was overjoyed to see Carl here, and her eyes shone. She noticed that Carl had taken longer than usual to arrive. Carl asked Faye how many times the Chamberlain had raised his hand to her. Faye then began to recall from the first meeting how many times he had beaten her. Faye began to curl her fingers, 1, 2, and more fingers. Carl could not believe his eyes. He was shocked at what he was seeing. Faye was afraid that Carl would judge her and began to apologize to him, but he said that he was not angry with her. Faye was surprised, for she was afraid of everything and of being judged. Carl said that Faye was innocent and that he was not angry with her. Carl blamed himself, for he had been inattentive, and he thought she could have handled it herself. Although he knew that Max didn't care, Carl felt that it was entirely his fault. Faye reached out and took hold of Carl's clothes, pulling him close to her, and asked him to keep them secret from Max. Carl was surprised and asked why it was necessary to keep it a secret from Warren. She said that Max would throw her out if he found out. Then it occurred to Carl that he had been beating her for a long time, and Warren didn't even know it. Carl grabbed Faye's arm and pulled her sleeve back and saw a bunch of bruises. He asked Faye if it was the Chamberlain who had said she would be kicked out if they found out she was being beaten. Carl was angry and wanted to kill the Chamberlain for beating and blackmailing Faye. All Carl said to Faye was that she should obey her master. He asked her who her master was and told her not to let anyone touch her. She was not to let anyone do what the Chamberlain had done, but first she must be cured, he said. Let us move to Warren's office, where Carl has already told what would have happened to Faye if he had not come in time, and he suggested that Max at least demote Chamberlain. He had given him a chance, but he had crossed the line, and those who crossed the line would not stop. Max said he had to be replaced because they were coming back, so he didn't need Kammerger. Warren said to tell the Chamberlain not to come to his room anymore. Let's go to Max's room. Faye was lying on the floor where she usually slept, thinking about the fact that she hadn't seen Cameron in days. She hoped he would be gone longer, but if not, she knew she would have to expect to see him again. Faye looked at Max as he slept, and she admired him. Faye wanted to touch him because she knew that he would melt away, but she wanted to be with him as long as possible. As she was admiring Max, she noticed that he was sweating, and Faye went over to him. She saw that Max was completely wet, and she remembered that her mother had been sweating like that, so she took a cloth and tried to wipe him off. Gently, she bent down and reached out to wipe Max's face, but he opened his eyes quickly and wide. Max grabbed Faye's arms and froze her in place. Holding Faye tightly, he asked her what she was doing. Faye, frightened and confused, begins to apologize, saying it was her fault. She looks at Max's angry gaze and doesn't know what to do or what to expect. Faye thinks he's going to send her off much earlier, somewhere he said he would. Max doesn't understand anything when he wakes up, and Faye is crying and apologizing all the time. Then Max saw the handkerchief in Faye's hand and realized that she was just trying to wipe it away. Max called the crying Faye to him and hugged her. He told her that he had scared Faye, but that he would never do it again, and he wiped her tears. She tried to explain to Max that before her mother died, she had been sweating a lot because she had been so worried. It's morning, Faye is working as a maid, and now she has a lot of work to do in the laundry room. Looking at her bruises, she never dreamed she would be working, but good people are surrounded by good people. She was only asked to follow the master's wishes, but she thinks she has failed in that. It is not enough for her to know that he is doing well. She wants to be with Max all the time, but she pushes those thoughts away and just thinks she should be grateful that Warren saved her. She thinks that she has no right to think of anything more than just doing her job and not upsetting her master. Faye was taking her wet clothes outside to dry when she ran into the boys. They grabbed her and carried her into the woods, and the bucket fell and the clothes fell and lay on the floor. They threw her on the grass and said that it was difficult to catch her because she did not come out for a long time. Among all the voices, she heard a familiar voice, that of the Chamberlain. He said that she was a captive mutt and could do nothing but beat her. Faye was surprised to see the Chamberlain, but she didn't understand what he was doing here. The Chamberlain kept shouting that it was Faye's fault, that he couldn't believe he had lost his position to someone like her, but he said that she didn't talk so he didn't have to worry. The guys said not to worry, they would deal with her because no one would look for a prisoner from another country. One of the boys said he had heard that Faye had subdued the commander-in-chief and the commander of the knights. They captured her, and she recalled that Charles had said not to let anyone touch her, so Faye did not hesitate to grab her attacker's hand and bite him as hard as she could. The attacker yelled at Faye that she was crazy and slapped her. Faye fell down and bowed her head, but this time she did not give up and did not want to die. For only now, in all her years of life, did she have someone dear to her heart. Max was walking through the palace when he heard the horses laughing and standing on their horses' tails. Warren wondered why all the animals were so mad, for do animals do that for no reason? Max realized when he saw a bucket of clothes lying on the floor and he ran away. When he found the reason, he came to the clearing and saw everything and said enough is enough. The assailant was surprised to see Warren, and he inquired in astonishment what he was doing there. Max looked at Faye, who looked only at him as a savior angel. Faye wanted to get up and run to Max, but he told her to stay down. Everyone looked at Warren and Faye, not knowing what was going on between them. Faye cries so much, she's so weak it's annoying, and Max hasn't been that kind to her, or gentle, but as soon as he sees her weak body or that she's in pain, he gets worried. Faye ran up to Warren, and he hugged her, protecting her from all her troubles and fears. Max drew his sword and severely punished the attackers for what they had done to Faye. Night fell, and Faye could barely open her eyes after the events that had taken place. Max finally waited for her to wake up and sat by her side the whole time. Faye seemed glad to have Max by her side, but she started crying again because he only sees her in a miserable way. She didn't want him to see her so miserable, but he just called her over. He put her on his lap and embraced her as if she were his most precious possession. He asked her how she was feeling, gently wiping away her tears with his hand. She caught his hand and stopped him from making excuses and saying that it was all her fault, so that he would not leave her. She begged him to leave her, saying that she wanted to be near him and did not want another master. Max asked if she didn't hate him, because she wouldn't have been hurt if he had helped her. But she only said that he had hugged her, that no one had ever done that before, that she had no one but Max, and that she could not believe she was saying that. Faye asked what she must do to be his maid, and she would do anything. Max simply hugged her, pressing her small head close to his big torso, kissing her on the forehead. Warren told her not to go anywhere with strangers, not to trust anyone but him, even if it was his orders, to believe only what Max said. Since when did Warren feel responsible for someone he was just supposed to use? But it didn't matter now. Faye just snuggled closer to him. When she's in danger and Max sees her looking for him, he's relieved. Max stared at Faye as he put her to bed, just admiring her and thinking about her. He ran his fingers over her soft, plump, and beautiful lips and said that she was a good person. Let us move to the military camp of tents. It is now a week after the offensive, and it is time for everyone to leave, and we must return to the mansion. Zanuck asked Max if he would go to the capital, and he replied that he might. Then Carl asked if he was taking Faye back to the manor, but Max was not satisfied, so he said, "Why not?" Carl reminded him that Max had said he would go alone, but that his plans had changed, so Faye would go with Max. Zanuck was surprised at Max's loyalty, but confirmed that it was indeed dangerous to go to the imperial palace. Max says he'll go first, and Zanuck has to take care of the other soldiers. But Zanuck isn't sure he can handle it. But Max was confident and said it wasn't as hard as it looked. Max emphasized that Carl should lead Warren's army and go to the manor first. Carl only asked when he planned to return. Max replied that it would be at least 2 months, because he had to wait for the victory celebration. Max went into the tent and found Faye sleeping peacefully on the floor. He gently touched her shoulder to wake her up, but she quickly got up, saying that the bed was ready. He said that there was nothing wrong with them sleeping together in the same bed that night. Faye reached for Max's chest, and he was surprised and thought she wanted to hug him. But Faye only wanted to take off his clothes. She was only a servant, so he was wrong. Max was ashamed of himself for thinking such a foolish thing, and he laughed at himself and did not understand why he was sad that she did not hug him. Night covered the tent camp with darkness. Faye and Max slept together, Max's big body hugging Faye's small and fragile body. He kept thinking about her, about how good it felt to feel her body temperature gradually rise, and he couldn't remember ever feeling that way before. He thought about it and realized that no one had ever hugged her like he had, and Faye had told him that she loved to hug. Faye is sleeping sweetly, and through her sleep she hears Max's voice saying that she can sleep some more. She felt his warm hand and opened her eyes to see Max stroking her head and telling her she could sleep some more. She is shocked at Max's behavior and wonders why he is acting like this. Max told her she could rest until he called her to wash up. Faye doesn't understand why her heart is beating so fast. It feels like she is suffocating, and she wants to feel it again. Faye and Max had been riding a horse instead of a carriage for a long time, because the road was very hard, but Faye felt sick when the horse got tired. Max kept asking Faye if she was sick, but she kept saying she was fine, even though she wasn't. He was proud of her for sticking it out and said we'd be near the border soon, and we'd get some rest. Animal bonding is great, but not always, so if you don't stop, Faye might get sick. Max is upset that we should have taken the boat, because he's worried about Faye, so they're stopping here. Max tried to help Faye down from the horse, but she said she would get down on her own, which he ignored and let her down on a rock. As he took off Faye's boots, he massaged her feet and asked her excitedly if she was okay. While he was massaging her feet, Faye was terribly embarrassed, for he had never touched her like that before. Max was starting to feel embarrassed himself, so when Faye was ticklish, she accidentally kicked Max, but he just told her she could rest until lunchtime. Let's move on to the events in the capital in the conference room. The room was discussing Warren's arrival in the capital. He had done well on the battlefield, but he would be more trouble here. They want to get rid of Warren, but he's a good knight, so it will be very difficult. The last Warren Emperor is dead, but this one will go down in history for his victory over the 10 powers. When he returns, all the elite in power must go, but they cannot allow it. The elite cannot allow this to happen, so they decide to send an assassin after him. The elite have many doubts about the plan, whether Max is really unaccompanied, and what if the plan fails. But the Duke still stood his ground, saying that Warren had many enemies and would not suspect them. Max decided to spend the night at a mansion nearby, since it was already dark, so he and Faye would stay there. The Earl was glad to see Warren, but he hadn't expected him to come, so he made excuses all the time. Max said it was only for one night. The Count emphasized that if Max needed anything, he could always ask him. The Count conceived a plan to marry his daughter to Max so that he could get a prestigious title and be in high society. Max was already resting in his room and drinking wine from a glass, realizing that after the war he had become very desirable among women. The door of his room opened and a manor maid sent by the Count entered. He thought it was a gift from the Count, but when he tried to kiss the maid, he realized that she did not have calluses like the maids. He told her to go away, for he realized that she was the Earl's daughter, and he asked indignantly, since when is the Earl's daughter serving guests? Max gathered his things and went to Faye's room in indignation, and when he entered, he saw her sleeping sweetly in bed. He took her in his arms and told her that he understood that she was tired, but that she should be patient and that they should stay somewhere else. As Max held Faye in his arms, he found himself wondering who was the boss here, he or she. In the middle of the night, they arrived at a small hotel and asked for a double room, which was not available. Max asked if there were any other hotels here, but the owner said that this was the best hotel, that it was a single room but very spacious, and offered to show them. They came here because there are annoying things happening in other places, but here there are only single rooms. But it's too late. It's hard to find something better, so Max paid for a single room. Max was praising Faye for standing up to him when he was interrupted by a knock on the door. He told Faye to stay here and went to take care of it, but Faye said she wanted to go too. He told her not to go with him. She couldn't go with him, Max told her. She said she didn't want to be alone, but Max told her to go to bed and not to wait for him. He would be back soon. Hearing strange noises, he had to knock Faye out, and he hit her on the head so as not to hurt her but to knock her unconscious. Of course, rats only appear at this time, Max said when he saw the assassins coming for him. They annoyed him, of course, but they saved him from having to lie about having important business to attend to. He easily killed the 3 hired assassins with a swing of his sword. One of the assassins says that 10 men would not be enough to kill Max because he is not human. Max gives them 2 options. The first is to die in agony. The second is to die less painfully, but to say whose order it is. One of the murderers says Iopal, but Max doesn't believe him because he destroyed this country. He gave one last chance, but no one confessed, so he killed them all, realizing they were aristocrats. If it's an aristocratic group, we need to get to the palace very quickly. The sun was shining on the way to the palace, and Max and Faye were still riding to the capital. Max tells Faye to be patient, for soon they will reach another village. The assassins have been attacking them for 15 days in a row, and even an army can't withstand that many attacks. So it's no wonder Faye is barely holding on. Max would like to hear Faye complain a little about how tired she is, how hard it is. They had stopped at hotels and villages, so now they woke up in a village again. Max woke Faye up to give her some medicine because she was having a hard time on the road. He reassures her, saying that he knows it is hard, and asks her to bear it a little longer. He gives her a little to drink and keeps her close, holding her in his arms and caring for her. Perhaps they need to take a short break, because Max is tired of fighting off the murderers, and Faye will die of exhaustion. Max stroked Faye's plump lips, looking at her like an angel, and leaned in. Their lips touched. He kissed her. He clenched his fist because he didn't realize why he was doing it. He groaned with pleasure and covered his lips with his hands, and he enjoyed the kiss. He laid Faye down on the pillow and covered her with the blanket, and standing next to the bed, he took his lips and digested what had just happened. The next day, the sun was shining on the village market as Faye and Max walked around. Faye was delighted with everything and enjoyed walking with Max. Max seemed to be very comfortable with her, so he had some silly thoughts, but he had no choice. He couldn't leave her alone because they were always being attacked, so he had to be patient until they arrived. Max saw that Faye was staring at something with great delight and asked her where she was going, and she replied awkwardly, "Nowhere." He saw a pastry shop with desserts and realized that maybe she wanted to try some. Max bought a whole bag of caramel candy for Faye and decided to treat her. He leaned over to Faye, took one out, and asked her to say, "Ah," as he opened her mouth and gave her one. Faye bit into the candy and wondered why it was so hard. Max realized that she had never eaten candy and told her to chew it. Faye had never eaten anything so sweet, so Max handed her a bag of candy and told her it was for her. While Max was about to say something, Faye put a caramel in his mouth. He was surprised, and Faye probably thought it was cute. Max stood there like a statue, frozen. But after hugging Faye, they went on, and Max told her not to eat too much candy because it would make her appetite sick. Suddenly, Faye stopped and bent her head down in shame. Max asked her what was wrong, but Faye could only stammer out a few words. She was embarrassed and ashamed to continue. Max asked again, "Bleeding?" And without hesitation, he took off his cloak and covered Faye with it. Faye said that he shouldn't, because Max's clothes would get dirty, but he said it was all right. Before Faye could say anything, Max picked her up and told her not to worry. Max thought about it. He was wrong to think she was still a child. They went back to their room, Faye sitting on the edge of the bed in her robe. Max sat on a chair across from her. He put a damp towel on Faye's head and asked her how she felt and if she was in any pain. She was always putting up with it, never saying a word, as if she was used to it. Max told her to go to bed and that he would be there for her. Max strokes Faye's back, barely touching her, and thinks he'd better have picked a couple of killers. It's definitely distracted him. Max and Faye's carriage finally arrives in the capital. Max helped Faye out of the carriage and they started walking toward the gates. The knight asked why they were there and who they were, and Max introduced himself and said that he was following His Majesty's orders. The knight said that it was an honor for him and for everyone. The knights lined up on both sides and began to welcome Max on his return. The sun was shining brightly over the whole kingdom, and Max and Faye went to the main hall. Upon entering the palace, everyone immediately said that he could go in. Max asked to see to his maidservant, and they told him to do so and not to worry. Max went to the main hall, and Faye wished him good luck, and the servants looked after him. Eve began to ask Faye what her relationship was with the Marquis Warren, and Faye took a piece of paper and began to write. Before Faye could finish writing, Eve took the letter away and saw that Faye had been written by a servant. But why would he need a mute servant? She is very precious to the Marquis, and it is necessary to be polite, but Eva already considers everyone one family. They knew that Faye had been with Warren all the time, and they began to ask about his tastes. Eve was again rebuked, saying that even the mute maid was treated well. So what was she to them? The Marquis is not called a lion on the battlefield for nothing. His kindness seems to be limited to the maid. Max entered the main hall, walking down the red carpet toward the throne. He knelt down before the emperor and said that he had done as he was told. The emperor said that the Marquis had not changed at all, but now he was a duke. The emperor was proud but also saddened by Max's absence. The emperor asked if Max had seen his order and if he thought it was right. Max agreed and said that if it had not been for the crown prince, he would have died. The emperor asked him to raise his head and come closer because it was uncomfortable to speak like that. As Max approached the throne, he heard the emperor coughing and asked how ill he was. The emperor replied, "It seems very little." As the emperor's health deteriorated, the power of the aristocrats increased greatly. The emperor was about to put the crown prince on the throne, but he realized that he was not yet able to rule. Max offered to deal with this, but the king said that the prince must do it himself, or he is not worthy of the crown. The emperor thinks that if the prince is explained, he will cope, but he no longer has the strength to speak, so Max must leave. The whole city was buzzing with the news that Marquis Max Warren had returned from the war, a war hero, and everyone wanted to see him. A large chandelier shone over the banquet hall as the elite gathered. In the banquet hall, elite couples were dancing. It was a ball. Everyone was looking around and whispering to each other, "He is here. This person is here." Max entered the banquet hall, dressed in a beautiful white suit, and he was beautiful. He was congratulated on his victory by all who saw him in the hall, and he was the center of attention. The girls asked if he would come to the party tomorrow, and one of them even exclaimed that she was the daughter of a duke. But they were only annoying Max. He didn't want any of it. He only wanted to know how Faye was doing, for it was the first time she was alone with strangers, and he was worried. Max saw Duke Lightman coming down the stairs, and his son Mano, the heir apparent, was with him. He is a high-level knight, but inside he is a thief. Max thinks they shouldn't cross paths, so he decides to go away. But he hears someone say, "Is the main event of the evening about to begin?" He turned around and saw Rain Lightman, who said she was glad to see him. She is very intelligent, with a good character, owns a salon, and has a high status. Max says he has heard a lot about her, but he knows she is called the Flower of the Empire and thinks it is not without reason. He would like to ignore the aristocrat's daughter, but the number of attacks may increase, so it is better not to provoke her to return to Faye. He says that it is late and he must go, but Ryan asks why he is leaving so early. He kissed her hand politely and said he hoped to spend more time with her tomorrow. Rain plans to get closer to the Marquis of Warren, but is afraid he will find out that they sent the assassins. Lightman tells his daughter not to miss the chance to get closer to Max, but she only asks what will happen if Ilak is there. Rain thought Max would die in the war, so she didn't expect it, but Lightman said he would handle it. And he said that their lives depend on it, they have no other choice, so they should get closer and he'll figure out how to take Max out. The second day of the banquet came, and Rain planned to make Max her own. Rain waited for Max in the banquet hall and wondered why it was taking so long. It was now the third day of the banquet, and she was still waiting for Max to arrive. It was the fourth day, and she was still waiting for Max to arrive. Ryan threw her cup on the floor in anger, and it broke. She shouted angrily why he was not coming. It was the fourth day of the banquet. She leaned on the table in despair and called for Charlotte, the maid. She asked her to bribe the Duke's servant to find out more about him, whatever it took. Charlotte went to Ryan's chambers to tell him what she had learned. She does not believe what Charlotte says, but asks if it is true. He spends all day with the mute maid he brought back from the battlefield. Why should she believe it? Cries out Rain. But it is true, Charlotte said, that Faye does not leave the room and sits with the Duke all day and does all his bidding. Unable to accept this, Ryan clenched her fists in anger and said that she would do anything to prevent the maid from taking Max away. She asks Charlotte if the maid who is always with the Duke is annoying her. Rain says that he knows that Charlotte wanted to become Warren's mistress and that she must realize that she needs Max's approval to become one. She advised Charlotte not to miss her chance because she would not have another, and said when Charlotte decided to come, she would come. Ryan irritated Charlotte, but she was already thinking of not accepting because she would get rid of her anyway. Charlotte thinks of getting rid of Faye because if he treats the mute so well, he will treat her even better. She decides to do so because she thinks that nothing can save her anyway, even if she tells. The light came into Max's room. A breeze stirred the curtains as it came through the open window. Faye was sitting at her desk, writing in a very polite and prim way. Charlotte flew into the room and began to shout that there was trouble. She shouted that the Duke was seriously injured and that she had to go to him at once. Charlotte said that she had to call a doctor and told her to take a bag of money with her. Faye followed Charlotte, thinking only of Max and wondering if he was hurt as badly as he was. But Faye wondered why they were walking down a dark corridor when Max was supposed to be at the banquet. Charlotte was annoyed that Faye was walking so slowly and worried that they would be late and nothing would happen. Grabbing Faye's arm, Charlotte shouted that they had to hurry and began to drag her along. Charlotte said that if the Duke died, did Faye want to be responsible for his death, and if not, she should go. Faye didn't want to get Max in trouble, but she wondered why she was so uneasy. They left the palace, and Charlotte told a man that Faye had been abused and needed to be taken as far away as possible. She added that Faye could not speak and needed to be taken care of. Faye started to pull away. Charlotte shouted for him to take her away as soon as possible so that they would not get caught. The man said he would take her wherever she wanted to go. Faye decided without hesitation to run away, and she broke free and ran as far as she could see. As she ran, they only shouted after her where she was going, what she was doing, and that they should hurry. But an owl attacked them and gave Faye time to escape from the two.